Just delicious, clean, healthy meals shipped directly to your home twice a week. Contact them today to get started and tell them Mike Gallagher sent you, and you'll get a special discount. Call 800-442-DIET, 800-442-DIET, 800-442-3438, or just go to seattlesutton.com, seattlesutton.com.
It's headlight savings time again. The perfect time to replace your older, dimmer basic headlight bulbs with wider, brighter Sylvania bulbs, so you can see more of the road during the darkest nights of the year. Visit headlightsavingstime.com to find the right bulbs for you.
7:06. It's time for a dry basement and a healthy home. It's time to call Permaseal, 800-421-SCAL. And time to check the roads in the AM 560 Traffic Center with Jim.
Kennedy inbound scattered delays start around Canfield. It's about 35 minutes O'Hare to downtown, 22 from Montrose, 11 on the express lanes. About 28 minutes downtown to the airport. Eden's 21 minutes Lake Cook to the junction, outbound 20. About Eisenhower, 45 minutes, 390 to downtown. I got a crash at 9th Avenue, outbound 38 minutes, 390. Stevenson, 48 minutes, 355 to Lakeshore Drive, outbound 38. Ryan, 24 minutes, 95 to downtown. I-57, 22 minutes, I-80 to the merge. Bishop, 425. Northbound Tri-State traffic is heavy from Reagan Tollway to around North Avenue. The other tollways are still fairly light. No delays to report on I-80 or in Northwest Indiana. And that's traffic. I'm Chip Talamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center. Brian May.
Mostly cloudy today and tonight. High today 42, low tonight 31. For tomorrow, cloudy with a rain or snow shower in spots. High 37. Sunday turning out partly sunny. High 29. I'm Brian May on AM 560, The Answer.
37 at O'Hare. Next news at 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Find holiday gift ideas for you and the family at the leading indoor shooting range, Shoot Point Blank. Check out great savings on ammo, accessories, firearms, and more. Not sure what to get? Shoot Point Blank offers gift cards too. See shootpointblank.com for details.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. You know, we haven't gotten to this week, but I want to go back from a few days ago when Mike Bloomberg sat down for an interview with Gayle King on CBS to talk about his candidacy, of course, and respond to the criticism of the Bloomberg News decision that they will not cover Bloomberg, they will not cover his Democrat opponents, they will only cover Trump. And the pushback he's received, from some in the newsroom, not surprisingly, Bloomberg's response.
He recently said, Mini Mike Bloomberg has instructed his third-rate news organization not to investigate him or any Democrat, but to go after President Trump only. Well, you've got a nickname already. What's your response to what
Well, I don't know that I would accept the nickname. When I started a news business in my company, I hired somebody outside. Their job is to run the news organization. Their job is to set the ethics. I think people have said to me, how can you investigate yourself? And I said, I don't think you can. Mm-hmm. But if you take a look at the Bloomberg News Organization, we carry news from lots of different places, like New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. There's plenty of ways for people to get news about the candidates if they look at Bloomberg News.
But even your own news reporters have complained. They think it's unfair that they're not allowed to investigate other Democratic candidates because they're bosses in the race.
You just have to learn to live with some things. Okay. They get a paycheck. But with your paycheck comes some restrictions and responsibilities.
What?
Yeah.
And you're in the media, you're a journalist, and then you're told you can't cover any candidates in the Democratic race? Just have to focus on Trump.
The point is that the free media is bought and paid for.
Yeah.
And it's a business. And you know what? I don't disagree with what Mike Bloomberg said. I mean, I not that it's the reality. It's clearly the reality. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. You get a paycheck. You're going to have to live with some restrictions. And when the principal of your company runs for president,
this is the restriction that you have to live with.
So if you don't like it, leave, right?
But it's a reminder that it's a business. And so the reporting on the IG report this week, Natasha Bertrand in Politico. You know what the big takeaway for her from the IG's report was?
What?
That the lack of redacting certain portions of the report could pose problems for U.S. information sharing relationships. So these are the same people that want, that wanted and got the transcript of the Trump-Zelensky phone call released. They want all sorts of other private communications released. Adam Schiff is subpoenaing private phone records, including of journalists, and releasing information obtained from those private phone conversations. And Natasha Bertrand, who is supposed to be some sort of intelligence reporter for Politico, experts said the depiction of sources and vetting in the IG report could pose problems for U.S. information sharing relationships because we're having a public accounting for how the FBI did or didn't do its job properly. Senior officials there, agents that had involvement with these investigations. That's the big takeaway. It shouldn't be transparent. We shouldn't be disclosing this because we can just trust those in charge of our government, both the elected officials and the bureaucrats, appointed officials, to act consistent with the charter of their agency, right? Is that what we found? Glenn Greenwald, responding to that Politico article, tweeted, LOL, this is both hilarious and repulsive. One of the U.S.'s most paranoid, conspiratorial, and Kremlin-obsessed journalists complains that there's too much transparency. Her excuse, of course, is that it helps Russia. Her real reason is it exposes her narrative as a fraud. But it's a business. And their business is defeat Trump. Mm-hmm. And so the reporting...
So they're using all their soldiers, or Bloomberg is, because he's the puppet maker.
Well, that's not Politico.
No, that's not political.
And Shane Harris over at the Washington Post, same thing. Shane Harris of the Washington Post, the IG report confirms the Steele memos did not trigger the investigation, were not the basis of the application for FISA surveillance. FISA surveillance on Page. No, that's not true. It's a business. And that business deserves a reckoning just as these agencies do. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Julian Sanchez, senior fellow at the CATO Institute, founding editor of Just Security. And he has written on the Crossfire Hurricane Report's findings. Julian, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So what's your top line takeaway? There's also a concern about what wasn't redacted?
That is not the first thing I would highlight here. I think it is unusual in the sense that, you can clearly look through this and identify individual sources, and that you might argue that's not necessary to transparency. But most of those people had already been essentially identified in the press months ago. So, I think it's understandable why they're not terribly concerned with protecting details about sources. That's stuff that's been in the public domain for something like a year now. That's not my primary concern. My primary concern is looking at the progress of this investigation from, characterizing this initial application based on fairly thin sourcing as actually not the problem. That's just normal for FISA applications. And then watching over time as more information does come in, a really sort of increasingly egregious failure from the FBI to inform the court about this new information that's, the original case we made based on limited information in our initial application doesn't really seem to be holding up. We keep finding new things that don't fit the original argument we made, and the court doesn't get that. And so, you have an initial 3 months of fairly intrusive wiretapping of an American citizen that you could say, well, they didn't have a lot of information for these first 3 months. And then it extends for a year as the rationale for that starts really falling apart.
Right. And so, with respect to Carter Page and just generally speaking, and this is the point that Barr made, among others, is that, you initiate the investigation and then you are unable to corroborate information like that contained in the Steele dossier. You are coming across exculpatory information, and yet you persist. And that's problematic as well.
That's problematic. And, for me, there's a lot of talk about, well, does this show political bias? In a way, for me, that is the comforting explanation, because then you have a fairly limited problem, right? If this is a problem about people who don't like Trump, then you have a problem with, 0.1% of FISA applications in 1 year. And I think this is more consistent with the totality of facts in this report, if what you have is a problem with investigators who develop a theory and then cannot let go of it, cannot see, hey, new information doesn't track the thing we thought at the outset, then you potentially have a much wider problem. I thought the most chilling exchange on Wednesday at a hearing with Inspector General Michael Horowitz was with Senator Marsha Blackburn. She says, hey, how common is it to find this many, errors and problems in a FISA application? And I think she was expecting to say, yeah, no, this is an extraordinary situation. What he actually says is, actually, I have no idea. We've never done a deep dive like this on a specific FISA application. We've never kicked the tires on a FISA this hard. So the truth is, I just don't know if this is unusual or not. I certainly hope it is.
Well, and one of the reasons, among many, that's problematic is because the FISA court essentially has been a rubber stamp. 99% of FISA applications are approved, and it's not adversarial in nature. So it's almost completely reliant on the integrity of the moving agency.
That's right. It's not only non-adversarial. I mean, so wiretap applications are always initially non-adversarial, but it's also permanently covert. You do what's called a Title III wiretap, a regular criminal wiretap. When you're done with that wiretap, you got 90 days to inform the target, whether you find a crime or not. Partly for Fourth Amendment reasons, but certainly under the law, you've got to tell the person you wiretapped, hey, we did this, and either we're going to charge you with a crime or we're not going to charge you with a crime. But they find out about it. And if they do get charged, which is the point in a criminal investigation, there's discovery. They get to dig into, the process, and the court is going to hear if, hey, the police, when they applied for this wiretap, they were sloppy or they didn't, or they weren't truthful with the court. Agents in these cases know that's not going to happen. 99.9% of FISA targets are never going to learn about it, or never going to be charged in court. That's not the point of a FISA wiretap. It's intelligence gathering, not criminal prosecution. So, the court is only ever going to hear one side. There's never going to be that point where if you weren't behaving scrupulously, you're going to have to answer for that.
Well, so Lindsey Graham made a suggestion that he's uncertain if FISA courts can continue to exist without structural reforms. I mean, again, they've only been in existence 40 years. It's not like they're part of the founding of the nation. But and I assume that's probably some saber rattling by Graham. But it seems to me that it nonetheless is a legitimate question and an important topic for discussion, whether or not they should be allowed to continue, at least in their current form. And if you agree with that, then what are some reforms that could be attached to this so you're not solely reliant on, the integrity of FBI agents or CIA agents?
Yeah. I mean, so the first thing out the gate, I think, is we need audits of FISAs. I mean, it's outrageous that you get a report finding this many problems, and when someone says, is that unusual? The answer has to be, we have no idea. So I think first out of the gate, we need a review of FISA to find out how systematic problems like this are. And they're really a tricky kind of problem. About 20 years ago, the FISA court realized they had a problem with agents fudging applications. There would be information in the case file, and the application would say something a little bit different. And what we see, and so they instituted what are called the Woods procedures to kind of scrupulously check the case file to make sure everything matches the application. And what we realized, I think, as a result of this report is there's a harder problem to catch, because the really, really serious problems in this application weren't things they said in the application that if you look at the case file, it doesn't quite match up. There were a few of those things, but they're not the really serious problems. The really serious problems are the things in the case file that cut against the case they're making, but never make it into the application. And you can't check a fact that's never in the article. It's never in the application. But, I think greater transparency would help. We created an amicus in the FISC for issues involving new technology and new law. So if the court has to consider, a programmatic surveillance that involves some tricky technological question or a controversial legal theory question, you have these amici, friends of the court, who are legal and technical experts who can come in and give another perspective. And we've seen those be useful. We had a big report a few months ago showing some serious problems with an NSA surveillance collection program that in part came out because of the participation of one of these amici. So maybe this is an argument for broadening their scope and saying, it's not just on legal and technical questions you might need an outside perspective, but at least in some cases, maybe you need someone to kick the tires on whether the agents have been truly forthcoming.
He is, Julian Sanchez, senior fellow at the CATO Institute, founding editor of Just Security. Julian, thank you for joining us and appreciate your insights.
My pleasure.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
If you're self-employed and purchase your own health insurance, I have some good news. From now until December 15th, you cannot be denied coverage based on a pre-existing condition, and depending on your income, you may find a more affordable plan. And this year, thanks to President Trump, if you're healthy and your income is too high to qualify for a subsidy, there is a new and competitive non-Obamacare marketplace where premiums are much lower and the PPO networks include access to our teaching hospitals in Chicago. Employers who provide small group coverage also have new options, and so do seniors looking for Medicare